Hello, and welcome to BIBO Weekly's Between the Lines, where we bring you the news that you don't always hear about, but that you absolutely should know about. I'm Tracy S. Campbell, executive producer and host of BIBO Weekly. Now, today, we are going to jump right into it because we have two very important topics to cover that are affecting each and every one of us, no matter where you are in the world. That is the topics that include racial injustice, senseless killings of African American men specifically, and the Black Lives Matter movement. And we're going to check in with the COVID-19 situation because for the last couple of weeks, it's been pretty quiet on that front, but a lot has been happening. We have a lot to cover, so let's get into it. First up, we have the situation around Black Lives Matter, and more specifically, the senseless killings of our African American men. Over the last few weeks, protests have been held nationwide, which then led to a worldwide show of solidarity for what's happening here in the US. Even though the heinous and brutal murder of George Floyd that we all saw on that now infamous video, even though that was the tipping point, that was the last straw. Before that, there were just too many men to name. There was Manuel Ellis in Seattle, Washington, who was killed, and recent autopsy results have shown that he died of excessive force. There was Ahmaud Arbery in February of this year, and he was killed by two white men while taking a jog in the Atlanta area. Christian Cooper, who wasn't killed, thankfully, but was in the process of being wrongfully accused by a white woman in Central Park who was calling in to the police department that a Black man was attacking her. On the video, we can clearly see that not only was Christian Cooper not attacking her, but he was several feet away as well. We can roll back to the case of Freddie Gray, who was a 25-year-old in Baltimore who died in police custody due to excessive force. Specifically, his spine was injured. And there was Trayvon Martin, who was killed by George Zimmerman. And Black men everywhere were scared to wear a hoodie because, unfortunately, that was the item that was pinpointed in the murder of Trayvon Martin. Mind you, he wasn't even 20 years old. The murder of Trayvon Martin was the catalyst behind the creation of the Black Lives Matter movement. It was created by three Black activists, Alicia Garza, Patrisse Cullors, and Opal Tometi. These three women banded together and created a movement that now can boast 40 chapters nationwide. And their mission, their goal, is to combat the violence and the systemic racism against Black people. Now, when we talk about the Black Lives Matters movement, well, a lot of corporations, a lot of companies are jumping on the solidarity and showing their public support of Black Lives Matter. Companies such as Netflix, Wendy's, McDonald's, Nike, and Amazon. Now, in the case of Amazon, there's a lot going on there with Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos has been under fire lately. Why, you ask? Well, because he chose to put a Black Lives Matter banner on the Amazon website. If you go to Amazon.com, the banner's right there on the front page, and there are many folks who have an issue with that. Jeff Bezos shared an email that he received from a customer. And in this email, the customer uses the N word to describe Black people. And he goes on to say that even though he admires Jeff Bezos, he's not sure if he will continue to shop on Amazon. Well, Jeff Bezos fired back, and his reply succinctly says that this person, who we now know has a first name of Dave, is the kind of customer that Jeff is happy to lose. Now, all of this sounds great, and it sounds like Jeff Bezos is taking a hard stand against racism, and he's joining forces and really uniting around this movement that's occurring in our country. However, there are those that find him to be hypocritical. Allegedly, he has done other things recently that do not support someone who's in true solidarity with what's happening when it comes to police brutality and the need for some form of police reform. Jeff Bezos still is very much in cahoots with law enforcement. And that's because the Ring surveillance cameras and a facial recognition software called Rekognition with a K is still being actively sold on the Amazon website. Many folks say that because of this, and because of the fact that he has not canceled those contracts, those very lucrative contracts, that they do not buy that he is truly, truly showing support and solidarity behind racial injustice and police brutality. Also, there is the issue of Christian Smalls, who was fired for organizing a protest. Now, this was at the very beginning, everyone, of the COVID-19 breakout. Well, Christian Smalls organized a protest because at the Amazon warehouse where he worked, there was a first instance, if you will, of COVID-19. Someone came down with COVID-19, and the management team there refused to temporarily shut down that warehouse. So Christian Smalls wanted to do something about it. He formed a protest, and allegedly, Jeff Bezos said that he, Christian Smalls, was not very smart or articulate, and therefore they took action against him. So employees that are working on the inside of Amazon, despite the seemingly humanitarian actions of Jeff Bezos lately, are a little doubtful that he is being 100% authentic or sincere. Many are arguing that this is nothing more than a marketing ploy by these companies to capitalize on the emotional frenzy and the strong foothold that Black Lives Matter has right now in the general populace. So more remains to be seen on that front with Jeff Bezos and other retailers. We're going to see just how sincere they really are as time goes on. And now, another person that is at the forefront of all of this, and not in a good way, folks, is Donald Trump. Right now, he trails Joe Biden by 14 points, according to a recent CNN poll. Now, of course, Donald Trump wouldn't be Donald Trump if he did not have a response to CNN's poll. According to Donald Trump, it's fake news. And of course, he had to bring Hillary Clinton into the argument as well. So everyone, Trump is saying that the poll numbers are inaccurate, and he's saying that it's, again, fake news that is being promoted by CNN. Now, even if you don't agree with those latest poll numbers, one thing that we can all agree on is the despicable and insensitive stunt that he pulled just last week at the time in the airing of this broadcast. I don't have to say anymore. Why don't we just roll the video right now and you can see for yourself. I'm sure you've already seen it, but here you can also hear Bishop Marianne talk about just how disgusted she is with these actions. Let's roll the video.
We want to hear from Marianne Budde, the Bishop of the District of Columbia, who oversees the church that the president just used as a photo op. Bishop Budde, thank you for being here. What are your thoughts as you saw what happened and as you look at these images now of so many Americans crying out in the streets for law and order that is applied equally to all of us, regardless of color, regardless of economic status?
I want to thank you for letting me be on this, be part of this conversation. Let me be clear. The president just used a Bible, the most sacred text of the Judeo-Christian tradition, and one of the churches of my diocese, without permission, as a backdrop for a message antithetical to the teachings of Jesus and everything that our churches stand for. And to do so, as you just said, he sanctioned the use of tear gas by police officers in riot gear to clear the churchyard. I am outraged. The president did not pray when he came to St. John's, nor, as you just articulated, did he acknowledge the agony of our country right now, and in particular that of the people of color in our nation, who wonder if anyone in public power will ever acknowledge their sacred worth, and who are rightfully demanding an end to 400 years of systemic racism and white supremacy in our country. And I just want the world to know that we in the Diocese of Washington, following Jesus and his way of love, we distance ourselves from the incendiary language of this president. We follow someone who lived a life of nonviolence and sacrificial love. We align ourselves with those seeking justice for the death of George Floyd and countless others through the sacred act of peaceful protest. And I just can't believe what my eyes have seen tonight.
Well, everyone, I think she summed up the sentiment of many of us very, very well. Let's move on. Over the last few weeks, because of the protests, because of the worldwide outcry of rage against what happened to George Floyd and others that we mentioned earlier in this show, the issue of COVID-19, the status of COVID-19 has taken a back seat. Well, health officials are very worried because a lot of those protesters out there were not wearing masks, and social distancing is almost impossible in a situation like protesting. So they're extremely worried. And well, the numbers that we currently have are steadily going up, even though maybe not at the same rate as they were before. Right now in the US, 113 deaths have been confirmed as a result of COVID-19, with nearly 400,000 deaths worldwide. Now, those are the current stats, again, as of the time of this broadcast. 20,000 new cases are being reported. 20,000 new cases of COVID-19 are being reported daily here in the US right now. And again, at the time of this broadcast, 22 states are experiencing an uptick in the number of cases. 20 states, however, are showing a small decrease in the number of COVID-19 cases, with 8 states holding steady with no change. So right now we're in a situation where there is some increase, but not as drastic as it was a couple of months ago. Let's hope that that continues. However, with states lifting restrictions and almost half of the states seeing an uptick in cases, this does not bode well for long-term stats and numbers as it relates to trying to get back to normal, whatever that is going to be. However, we do have 133 potential vaccines that are in development right now. 133 worldwide are in development right now. There's a race going on for which company is going to produce the vaccine that is going to be the most effective and safe for human consumption. So we're going to keep an eye on that, but that is going on right now. The goal is to have this vaccine by the end of 2020, early 2021. But on a bit of good news, 2 countries have managed to all but virtually obliterate COVID-19. Iceland and New Zealand supposedly are virtually COVID-19 free. So let's take a look at this video courtesy of BBC, which gets into or shows us ways in which Iceland and New Zealand were able to more or less conquer, if we can use that word, COVID-19. The Prime Minister of New Zealand, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, makes a statement in regards to just how her country pulled together and band together to get to where they are with their success in battling COVID-19. Let's take a look.
New Zealand and Iceland are on the brink of eliminating COVID-19 with close to 0 active cases in both countries. Both are geographically isolated with small populations. Big advantages in fighting COVID-19. However, they've taken very different strategies with similar success. Let's start in New Zealand, which has had over 1,500 cases and 22 deaths. The Pacific Island nation of 5 million people implemented one of the toughest lockdowns in the world, shutting its borders, closing schools and workplaces. At its peak, New Zealand scored 96 out of 100 in Oxford University's stringency index, 100 being the toughest response. Well, the government, led by Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, has received global attention for her clear and decisive action. Here's one headline from the New York Times. Jacinda Ardern solved a drastic lockdown with straight talk and mum jokes. The Prime Minister's message also focused on kindness, spreading road signs. It's a strategy that has worked. In the past 10 days, New Zealand has not recorded any new cases. Well, according to this study by New Zealand's Otago University, it's on track to declare itself COVID-free in 3 weeks' time. More from New Zealand's reporter, Polina Lau.
New Zealand has currently 1 active case of COVID-19 remaining, and there have been no new cases confirmed for the past 10 days in a row. I think the success has been largely down to the government's decision to go into full lockdown early on. New Zealand had its first case confirmed at the end of February, and within a month, the country was in full lockdown at level 4. What this meant was only essential services were running, so hospitals, pharmacies and supermarkets. Everything else had to be closed, including any takeaways or food delivery services, and people were urged to stay home.
New Zealand's strategy isn't the only successful one. Iceland, which has had 1,800 cases and 10 deaths, went down a different track. It never imposed any lockdown whatsoever and instead implemented a strict policy of test, trace and isolate. Cafes were kept open and only some businesses like nightclubs were shut. Well, according to that Oxford University stringency test, the Nordic country scored only 53 out of 100 for its measures. That's about half that of New Zealand. But it is a strategy getting international recognition. This New Yorker article says it didn't just manage to flatten the curve, it virtually eliminated it. Only a handful of active cases remain. Here's Icelandic journalist Bjorni Petter.
The first case of COVID-19 was confirmed in Iceland on the 28th of February, and the first cases all came with Icelandic tourists coming from skiing resorts in Italy and Austria. And from the very beginning, the main focus was on quarantine and rigorous testing. Iceland has now tested over 61,000 people for the virus. It's a higher proportion of the population than most other countries, and only a handful have tested positive in May. So there are now only 2 active cases here.
So everyone, it looks like we can learn a thing or two from New Zealand and Iceland, according to that video. Now, we're going to, of course, keep on top of all of this, and hopefully the numbers in Iceland and New Zealand will continue to fall, and hopefully we, all the other countries, including the US, can learn something in battling this horrific pandemic. Switching gears, everyone, we are actually back in the studio recording new episodes of the B Zone with yours truly, Tracy S. Campbell, and the incredible people who join me, Dearies Perrin, Tamara Knighton, and others. So we are going to be tackling, of course, the issues around the social injustices that are going on from a different viewpoint, and of course, a whole host of other topics. So very, very soon, we're going to be able to announce the date when you can begin to check out the B Zone new episodes with Tracy S. Campbell on various AM, FM, terrestrial radio platforms, and of course, on iHeartRadio platform, podcast platform, Apple Podcasts, and TuneIn. Make sure you go over there and subscribe and like the various episodes that we have for you of the B Zone. And coming up on BIBO Weekly, we are going to do a deep dive, everyone, into a conversation that is taking center stage. Enough is enough. We're going to be talking about the effects of the deaths of all of these men that we mentioned earlier and more, as well as the deaths of Black women in the last few years and the toll it has taken on the mentality of Black men and women, Black and brown, and how they're dealing with it and how some of these folks are helping others. We're going to be joined by popular radio personalities and DJs, Mike Love and Diz, here in the Chicagoland area and abroad. They are very well-known voices in the African-American community. They're going to talk to us about the effects of all of this on them as Black men, but also how the media is handling the reporting of this information. We're also going to spend time talking to the women, Black and brown, activists in the Chicagoland community and more, of how the demise of Black men is affecting the women, the families, the mothers, the daughters, the sisters, and the grandmothers who are having to bury their sons and grandsons well before their time. This is a very serious issue, folks, and we're going to take the time on BIBO Weekly coming up in the next couple of episodes to delve into it and hopefully leave you with food for thought and, in some cases, much needed revelation. That's it for Between the Lines this week, everyone. I hope that you enjoyed today's broadcast. Make sure you follow us at BIBOweekly.com. Again, that's BIBOweekly.com. And yes, we're going to be bringing you more information here on Between the Lines, and we have some great interviews coming up really shortly for you here as well. Make sure you stay safe, stay healthy, but as I say every week here, or every other week here on Between the Lines, it is important more than ever, everyone, to stay informed. See you soon. Hello, and welcome to BIBO Weekly's Between the Lines, where we bring you the news that you don't always hear about, but that you absolutely should know about. I'm Tracy S. Campbell, executive producer and host of BIBO Weekly. Now, today, we are going to jump right into it because we have two very important topics to cover that are affecting each and every one of us, no matter where you are in the world. That is the topics that include racial injustice, senseless killings of African American men specifically, and the Black Lives Matter movement. And we're going to check in with the COVID-19 situation because for the last couple of weeks, it's been pretty quiet on that front, but a lot has been happening. We have a lot to cover, so let's get into it. First up, we have the situation around Black Lives Matter, and more specifically, the senseless killings of our African American men. Over the last few weeks, protests have been held nationwide, which then led to a worldwide show of solidarity for what's happening here in the US. Even though the heinous and brutal murder of George Floyd that we all saw on that now infamous video, even though that was the tipping point, that was the last straw. Before that, there were just too many men to name. There was Manuel Ellis in Seattle, Washington, who was killed, and recent autopsy results have shown that he died of excessive force. There was Ahmaud Arbery in February of this year, and he was killed by two white men while taking a jog in the Atlanta area. Christian Cooper, who wasn't killed, thankfully, but was in the process of being wrongfully accused by a white woman in Central Park who was calling in to the police department that a Black man was attacking her. On the video, we can clearly see that not only was Christian Cooper not attacking her, but he was several feet away as well. We can roll back to the case of Freddie Gray, who was a 25-year-old in Baltimore who died in police custody due to excessive force. Specifically, his spine was injured. And there was Trayvon Martin, who was killed by George Zimmerman. And Black men everywhere were scared to wear a hoodie because, unfortunately, that was the item